Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. Malignant Young Puck Dotty inside my chest, ladies and gentlemen. Appreciate you guys for stopping by very much. Just getting my stuff situated here. All good to go. Turn that off. All right. So as you guys know, we do have the Sinquefield Cup going on. So this is the game from round 2. As you guys are familiar, this is a very classical tournament. So these guys have like literally like 3 or 4 hours to play the game. So that's why you pretty much only get a game a day. So this game just recently got done. Let me fix this. It's kind of bothering me a touch. Bam. So they just got done with this game. And it was a pretty roller coaster game. And it was real tight. So it's like, I mean, you know, it just was, you know, kind of went to one side because, you know, there was just a little bit of a, you know, kind of a miscalculation plus some time issues and stuff like that. So for all of my people in the Philippines, I will say mabuhay to you. Kamusta na aking makaibigan. Maraming salamat po sa nanonood ng aking mga video. And hello ulit. Appreciate you guys very much for stopping by. Anybody who is coming from Dariusz Świercz used to represent Poland up until 2018, so I'll put a little Polish flag under his name. So anybody who is coming from Poland, I would say Cześć, dziękuję. Thank you very much for stopping by and taking a look at my stuff. You guys are ready to go. Let's take a look, see what we have for this game. So we got e4, e5, knight to f3, knight comes to c6, bishop to b5. So, you know, of course, as you guys know, this is the strongest move in the history of chess. Now playing. We got knight to f6, so we do have the Berlin defense. So this is really the stone wall for black. You know, they try to, you know, basically put up like, you know, the best front possible and just be as solid as possible. So it's very nice as black. So we have castles by white. Knight takes e4, but as you guys know, you are getting the pawn back, and you do it as follows. You got d4, knight comes back to d6. You see pawn takes c6, pawn takes c6, pawn takes e5. You know, this is just one of many variations that you can play. Of course, you guys know, I mean, you can do this so many different ways. We got knight to f5. We have queen takes d8, king takes d8. We got h3. Bishop comes to d7. You see rook over to d1. Bishop comes to e7. We got g4, and that's inviting knight to h4. Knight takes h4, bishop takes h4. We got knight to d2. We got king to c8. Knight comes to f3, attacking the bishop. Of course, now it's going to move. Bishop comes back to e7. And I mean, as interesting as it looks, you know, even though, you know, you pretty much have this king kind of like, you know, shuffling back and forth, and you do have these rooks kind of like blocked in the corners at the moment, this is very, very solid for black. You know, it's roughly equal around this stage in the game. So, I mean, no side is really doing any better than the other side. So we got bishop to g5. Bishop comes to c5. We got rook up to d3. Bishop to e6. We see bishop down to e3. I mean, the bishop wasn't really doing anything on g5. Bishop takes e3. Rook takes e3. We got king down to d7. And then we have knight to d4. And knight to d4 is the novelty of the game. As you guys know, with the Berlin being played so heavily and like studied so deeply, it is really hard to come up with novelties, you know, in this opening. But knight comes to d4, and this is the novelty of the game. I'm thinking, yeah, I'm not sure what the alternative was, like what the other move was that has been seen. There's been about, I think, 3 or 4 different times this exact position has been seen. But like I said, we did have knight to d4. We got rook a to d8. We see f4. So, you know, we're trying to like displace this bishop and make it a little bit uncomfortable. We got king over to e7. And the really interesting thing about this particular position is that Dariusz Świercz, he takes 46 minutes to make this move as white. So he like burns like half of his time off the clock. He had like 126 or 128, I think, at this point. And he goes all the way down to like 42 minutes and stuff. So this was a very critical point in the game as far as he was concerned. So like I said, it did take him 46 minutes to take knight takes e6. I mean, I feel like knight takes e6 was pretty natural. I mean, you can also, I mean, possibly push f5 or something. You know, there were other options that you can go. I mean, you can just go like just simply c3. There's rook coming to d3. And I mean, you know, of course, you're not worried about bishop to c4 because you have knight to f5 with check. So, I mean, you had a lot of different options in position, but I think the most, like, the move that stood out the most was knight takes e6, and it was the best move in the position. So, he definitely, got some, got some benefit to him taking so long. Pawn took e6. We got rook to f1. We see h5. We got f5. So these are all like very accurate moves by white. So I mean, in his like time that he spent, I mean, he definitely got some good calculation and some good understanding going on. So pawn takes g4. Pawn takes g4. We see rook down to h4. Of course, we're gonna attack this pawn. There's some ways to defend it, but it kind of makes you a little passive as white. We got f6 with check. King comes to f7. We got rook up to e4. Now we're defending the rook. We got rook down to d2. Pawn takes g7. King takes g7. We have rook to f2. Cool. And, we have two really different possibilities in the position. We have just the direct rook takes f2, which is what we actually saw Wesley do in the game. And then king takes f2. We got rook to h2 with check. King comes up to f3, and then rook takes c2. And, you've gotten your rook on the 7th rank, and you're going to start mopping up pawns. Also, what was possible is a little bit more of a sneaky rook to h1. And then, after king takes h1, rook takes f2, rook to c4. You got king to g6, king to g1, rook over to e2. You got a4, king to g5. And you guys can see, I mean, this pawn is under threat. So you're really kind of like tying this rook down a little bit, and then also this pawn is threatened as well. So you don't really have a lot of movability with your rook. But like I said, we did see rook takes c2. Rook came to d4. We got rook taking b2. So as you guys can see, if white is not like, being, like really, like immediate with their actions, they're just literally losing all kinds of pawns. So we see rook to d7 with check. King comes to g6, and then now we're able to take on c7. And we're kind of keeping away from taking on a2 because we're going to be taking on b7. And, white is like, they're doing okay. We got c5. Just kind of like, putting the white in Zug, trying to like, or Zugzwang, I'm sorry. Trying to Zugzwang, white, like not really giving them a lot of good options. We see rook over to e7. Rook comes to b6, defending the pawn on e6. We see rook over to c7. We got a6, which even though it looks like, why are you just like not defending this pawn at all? At the end of the day, a6 is the best move in the position. So, I mean, Wesley is where he is for a reason. Rook takes c5. We see rook up to c6. And this is a very critical point in the game. This is where Dariusz Świercz actually made like a pretty, pretty big mistake in his move. The move that you really kind of want to do, which actually gives, black and white some equality, is actually rook takes c6. After pawn takes c6, you got king over to e3. Making sure you don't directly go to king to e4. We got king to g5, king to d4, king takes g4. We got a4, a5, king to c5. We got king to f4, king up to b6, king takes e5, king takes a5. We got king down to d4. We see king up to b6, c5, a5, c4, a6, c3, a7, c2. Pawn equals queen, pawn equals queen. And as you guys can see, this is a fairly equal position. You are up a pawn as black, but I mean, you're really not going to be able to push this pawn very far. You're going to be pretty much checked to death by the white queen. Dariusz Świercz went rook to a5 in this position. And it actually allowed like Wesley to, put some nice, technique forward and to kind of throw some finishing touches on the situation. We see rook down to c3 with check. King comes to e4. We see rook to c4 with check. King comes to d3. Rook takes g4. So now we have a pawn dropping for white. Rook comes to c5. We see king down to f5. Now we're really tying this rook down to this pawn, and also this rook is cutting off this king. So like everything that black has is doing a really good job. Rook comes to c3. We see b5, and then we see king to b3, and we have a like nail in the coffin finishing move that Wesley found. So if you want to pause the video and see what this move is, go ahead and do so. Okay, cool. So I think some of you guys might be looking like, okay, this king is attacking this pawn and only the rook is defending. So like I can bring this rook to e4, right? That is actually a good move, but I'm looking for like a real nail in the coffin. And the move is actually forcing the rook away from the defense of this pawn with rook to c4. Rook to c4 is the move that Wesley found. And basically the point is now you are making this rook like very, very uncomfortable because it's trying to hold this pawn, but it doesn't have anywhere to go now. It can't go here and it can't stay on the square it's on, so it's forcing the trade. And so, I mean, after what we actually see in the game is rook takes c4, pawn takes c4, king takes c4. We have king taking e5, we got a4, and then king comes to f4. And there is nothing that's stopping this pawn from queening. And you're just not going to be in time as white. I mean, if we play this out, if we kind of come up here and try to do this here, king's going to take, and then you step off like that. You know, the pawn's going to come down, and you guys can see that you are just simply one move too far. This queen is going to start coming up and harassing this king. And because this pawn is not on the 7th rank, and I think that's why, you know, Dariusz Świercz, he took like maybe probably 4 or 5 minutes to actually like get to this point and resign the game, because I think he was calculating and seeing if he could possibly draw. If this pawn was actually on a7, it would be a draw. That is a very like theoretical draw, but you do not have that possibility with it being on the 6th rank. So it's just like little small details like that really make an in-game like winning or losing, and you know, definitely, you know, makes it to where you're playing certain moves and going into certain end games and stuff like that. So usually games simplify down into a certain type of a theoretical end game. But yes, that is that game. It's nice that Wesley so got a win. I mean, he really was like super close yesterday on that win, but he just could not close that game out. So that is unfortunate for him, but this is a nice win for him. So I'm going to go ahead and not go too much longer here. I appreciate everybody very much that's coming from anywhere in the world. And also something I didn't mention before, you know, what I do when I speak different languages and stuff like that, you know, when I see comments from people in different languages, I like jot down words and stuff from there. So, you know, like in the future, if I say a word or I say a phrase and I attempt something in a certain language, if you are like a native of that language and you can give some like feedback, you know, definitely let me know if I said it incorrectly. But like, don't try to throw me like a bunch of words because it just kind of loads up and it gets too daunting to try to like, you know, get stuff figured out. So like I said, if I ask for some help, hook me up, please. But you know, just try to keep it simple. There's some languages that there are some languages that I only want like a few phrases in. I focus mostly on Tagalog right now because that's where like a majority of my subscriber base is coming from. So I like to, you know, just do that connection with them and stuff like that. But definitely be there if I need you. Appreciate it very much. I appreciate everybody coming from the Philippines. I would say Makita tayo mamaya, paalam, and I'll see you guys next time.